Could you ever see this split, this dispute that they have ever happening?
Never in a month of Sundays would I have said that they were going to fall out. Harry, when he was much younger, when about 5 or 6, whenever he was with his mother, he used to give the waiting photographers the fingers. You know, he used to stick 2 fingers up, and he was always chastised by Diana because he was a cheeky chappy. As the boys got older, and I've seen them together, I've seen them on the ski slopes, they got on very, very well. And this is why I think that one of the things that Harry said in his book Spare, you know, about his father, was so wrong. I mean, I watched the then Prince, with his children, and he was as loving to those boys as was Diana. Diana was much more extrovert. You know, once in Canada, you know, the boys were on the Royal Yacht Britannia. They just arrived. Diana and Charles had just finished a job. Diana walks up the gangplank. Charles is very polite. He stands there and says hello to the captain, the first officer, the cook, you know, the first mate, whatever. Diana ignores them all and goes, runs practically down the gangplank with her arms wide open, and the boys rush up to her and give her a... That's the picture that made, you know, the newspapers all over the world. And poor old Charles is left looking like a lemon, as he was in India when he didn't take her to the Taj Mahal and left her sitting alone there while he was addressing a business meeting 500 miles away. He just didn't get those sort of things right. But the boys themselves were always very pleasant. I mean, I was there the day that William passed his driving test, which was great fun. And so we got to see them on special occasions, and they were always reasonably friendly. They'd all say hello. I mean, I remember in Canada, when they both went to when they were in Canada, it was like the Beatles had arrived.
This was just shortly after Diana died, wasn't it?
No, this was before. This was way before.
Oh, right,
this was way before Diana died. Was it before Diana? I'm sorry. Well, whenever it was, the boys, it must have been after Diana died. The boys went up, and they were walking up to an event, and the screams, it was like the Beatles, you know, it was just pop stars stuff, you know. And I was behind them, and Harry kept saying to William, raise your hand again and see what happens. And every time, William was like an Ottoman, waving his hand. And of course, all these girls were just trying to rush forward. It was a fantastic set. And they were really close. And this is what makes it so sad that they're now so far apart. I mean, if William, well, it's not if, but when William becomes king, I always believed that Harry would be one of his top advisors. I think that's out the window now. Yeah. Right out the window.
It should be his wingman.
It should be.
Was his, that's his thing.
And that's what Diana always wanted, the boys to remain as close as possible. They had each other, and it was them against the rest of the world. But of course now, you know, it's not going to happen.
Very sad. One thing I was going to say is that I attended the late Queen's funeral, and I remember being there and thinking about journalists like you that had worked on The Sun for so many years that kind of didn't get the opportunity to put a byline on or to attend the funeral and report on it. However, one of my regrets was that I never, because of COVID and because of her ill health, I never really got many jobs with the late Queen Elizabeth II. But you would have done. You would have, when you were reporting for The Sun and for the other newspapers and commentating, you would have spoke to the Queen many times, have you? Or...
I did, and it was always fantastic chats. But my first meeting with the Queen went terribly. It was in Germany many years ago, the late 80s, where we were in a financial crisis. The pound was worth nothing against the then Deutschmark, and we'd gone on this tour, and there was this huge reception, as there always is for a royal tour. And I was with another royal reporter from another newspaper, and this was my very first meeting with a member of the royal family. And this bloke was telling me, like, we stand in little groups of 6 or 7. The Queen comes round. There will be a Foreign Office official there. He or she are just there just to move the Queen on. if the conversation gets a bit fruity or, a bit off. I said, okay. And remember, the Queen will approach you. She will hold out her hand first. You shake it. She speaks first. The usual thing. She's got many icebreakers like, do you come here often? Have you travelled far? Oh, aren't the flowers lovely? It's this sort of opening gambits that the monarch usually does. So I said to this bloke, I said, oh, that's fine. Okay, that's really kind. So I'm a bit nervous. So they come into the room. It's a huge ballroom type. It's not just a small room. So there's all these people, all these little groups around. And the monarch comes up. And this bloke, he's first. And so the Queen holds out her hand. And as he's holding her hand, he suddenly says to her, do you know, ma'am, you cannot buy the good old, you cannot change the good old British pound in this country because of the financial crisis. What do you think of that? With that, the Foreign Office aide put his arm in the back of the Queen and moved her on. And I'm just standing there like a lemon as they moved on to the next group. And I looked at him and I said, I thought you said, yes, he said, but I thought I'd try and get a reaction. It didn't work, did it? I said, no, it didn't. You've just robbed me of my meeting with the Queen. But other times have been much more fun. I mean, South Africa, when she was having the official welcome in South Africa, there was a sort of 21-gun salute. And she was standing with Tambo and Becky, and we were on a sort of a concrete dais just opposite, quite a bit opposite. What we didn't understand, or we didn't know at that time, was that the guns for the 21-gun salute were underneath this dais. So when they went off, we had the smoke come up, covered us all in smoke. We couldn't see anything. Photographers certainly couldn't take any pictures. There was nothing. So that was ruined. And later on that day, we went to a reception with the Queen, and she came into the room and started chatting away. She said, how did you enjoy the reception that I got? And we said, well, she says, well, you see, I knew what was going to happen. She said, because I saw the rehearsal the day before from my room here, and I saw all the smoke come up. And she said, I've often wondered what the best way would be to get rid of you all, and I've just found the exact way of doing it. Just cover you in smoke and puff, you disappear. She was laughing all the way. I mean, she's great fun, really, really, really good fun. The last time I met the Queen was in 2014, and she was the patron of the journalist charity. And I was asked to go there with a whole load of other journalists as well. And one of the journalists that was there was a guy called Harry Arnold, a very famous journalist, used to do your job, used to do the job that we both did. And we knew then he was dying of cancer. And I took it upon myself to speak to one of the aides of the Queen and said, look, this is probably going to be Harry's last outing at all about anything. Is it possible the Queen could stop in the receive, as she comes round? She said, what can I do? And all of a sudden, the Queen came down. She stopped in front of us, hands come out, shook our hands and everything else. And then she said, it's remarkable that the journalist charity is now 150 years old. And I just said, off the cuff, I said, yeah, it's almost as old as Harry here. So we all started to laugh, and she looked at me and she said in her best Dick Emery voice, he was a comedian of many, many moons ago, oh, you are awful. But it was a really nice thing for her to do. She didn't have to do it. It was nice for her to do it. And there's one little postscript, and that was a few months later. Harry is in a hospice, and the nurses are coming around, and they're doing one of those dementia checks, Do you know who the Prime Minister is? What date is it? Do you know who the monarch is? And Harry says, yes, Queen Elizabeth II. I was with her a few weeks ago, and we had a great chat. And of course, the nurses are, I think he's starting to go now, And it was only when Mary, his wife, brought in the photograph of Harry and myself with the Queen that they realised that he actually did meet the Queen.